We choose this topic so that we can investigate and learn more about the difficulty on learning. Globally, everything has stopped, projects are delayed, workplaces are closed, and schools stop working. The globe seems to possess ground to a halt thanks to the novel coronavirus.
Some students continue their education even though through online learning. Many students participating in home learning program also say that the workload of online classes is larger than of normal classes. Normal classes may are difficult, but having friends makes it such a more manageable and fewer stressful. For the most part, making the transition to life as an online student has been relatively smooth thanks to the hard work of my course coordinator to upload of my resources I need. Learning during the remote period has been researched from the perspective of teachers and students.
In this slide, discussing the many students who participate in home study programs also say that the load of online classes is greater than in our class. The changes in government law in the situation of changes in education that depicted here are the people who lack funds and the programs of students do not have the devices and internet access to be ready to participate in online classes, as well as schools do not have the ability to show up online.
Background of the study. The COVID-19 pandemic has become a global health issue and has had a major impact on education. Specifically, halfway through the second semester of the academic year 2019-2020, learning methods were delivered through distance learning. We aim to evaluate the students' perspective of distance learning compared to classroom learning. Countries who still experiencing learning through distance class are Philippines, Denmark, and South Korea. While countries are at different points in their COVID-19 infection rates, worldwide there are currently more than 1.2 billion children and 186 countries affected by school closures due to the pandemic. In Denmark, the non-compulsory part of the curriculum each week of school closures represents about 30 hours of face-to-face in school due to strict instructions given by schools. The schools were forced to change the time and flow into class with online learning and homeschooling. In most cases facilitated by teachers and parents. Moreover, children up to the age of 11 are returning to nurseries and schools after initially closing on 12 on March. But in South Korea, students are not responding to roll calls from their teachers online. The system has been unstable due to a sudden surge in the number of users, and some schools had to postpone their classes while waiting for the system to be back online. With this sudden shift away from the classroom, in many parts of the globe, some are wondering whether the adoption of online learning will continue to persist post-pandemic and how such a shift would impact the worldwide education market. This is our data. The COVID-19 has staggering impact on global education. 1.3 billion number of learners impact by national school closures worldwide.
This pandemic, the COVID-19 has brought a lot of extraordinary challenges and it has been affected the educational sectors and no one knows when will this happening last. Every country has their own perspective or idea on how to embrace this kind of situation. The increasing cases of COVID-19 that results all schools in the Philippines are closed and it has a huge effect of each and every one of us. Though various organization Philippines suddenly modifies their workflow strategies and adopt new technologies, the Education Department is taking every possible measure to reduce the impact of the pandemic situation in the country. Education advocates have said that the pandemic highlighted the gaps in the Philippine education system. This was evident in the erroneous learning modules distributed to the public school students during the pandemic. Painful. Grammatical errors, wrong math equations, and depictions of gender stereotypes alarm a public already worried over the quality of education that over 24 million students were receiving during the pandemic. Aside from learning module blunders, the pandemic exposed cracks in the country's education system. If the problem before the pandemic was the lack of classrooms, the problem now is the lack of computers. We have a problem with the quantity and quality which were magnified by the pandemic.
As the COVID-19 pandemic worsened in countries across the globe, most governments chose to close the schools to avoid from spreading the virus through students. In Denmark, except the non-compulsory part of curriculum, each week of closure represent about 30 hours of face-to-face in the school due to strict instruction given. Schools were forced to change the time and flow in class with online learning and homeschooling, in most cases facilitated by teachers and parents. After weeks of school closure, some countries are not preparing for the conflicts process of gradually reopening the school. It has huge effect for students in school in Denmark in facing the impact of the COVID pandemic. Every school come up with unique and very useful idea to suit this situation in some innovative device solution in order to deliver teaching and ensure learning can happen even though it's not face-to-face, although the absence of face-to-face lesson can be somewhat compensated by use of online platforms and other technology and access to digital necessary. Digital device but some are not distributed equally to other places. The COVID-19 crisis is changing the life of millions of families around the world. The students with their families are slowly adjusting in this new type of style in school for preventing the risk of spreading virus. Somehow, there are still students who can negatively affected in academics, also their motivation. Moreover, in this remote teaching and learning, the parents become a way of resource for education as both motivators of student engagement and facilitators of student learning, especially students that are struggling and has disadvantaged backgrounds who have the access to this type of learning may be affected severely due to COVID-19 crisis. This result as the increasing of learning inequalities.
In South Korea, the Education Ministry decided to substitute online learning for the opening of physical school so classes can continue to use online models of learning. Online training was implemented starting with students in their last middle and secondary school year and was completely extended to all other grades. But we all know clearly that some aspects of education such as interaction with professors, dormitory, in campus, and some activities cannot be performed virtually. One of the main reasons for the idea of phased online learning was to buy time for teachers and educational information and communication technology or ICT infrastructure. To prepare an unforeseen issue, ICT infrastructure expansion was the first step that was taken. The long-standing reputation of South Korea as a pioneer in global ICT.